going to read one of my all-time favorite children's books, The Wicked Kings of Bloon. And you can see them on the cover there. That's Heathfern and Forage. The Wicked Kings of Bloon by Stephen Kellogg. Bloon is a summer land of warm golden fields and tiny villages. The gentle folk who live there spend their days walking through the flowers, telling silly stories and snoozing in the sun. On the outskirts of Bloon is the land of monsters, where strange beasts snore in murky lairs. The only people who live there are several retired wizards, a fuzzy hermit or two, and the meanest hag of them all, Hepzibah. Now, Hepzibah lived in a miserable little hut with her twin sons, Forage and Heathfern. All day long she nagged and screamed and punished the boys. From breakfast to bedtime she bellowed and belched and jumped up and down. Forage! Forage, you little wretch! Why can't you do anything right? Why can't you be more like Heathfern? Heathfern, you ugly beast! Why are you so clumsy and awful? Why can't you do anything right? Why can't you be like Forage? Each day the two boys listened to their foul-tempered mother and grew to hate each other more and more. Each day they found new and interesting weapons with which to bash and pound each other. Finally, by the time they were 20, they had flattened their little shack. "Eeeeog!" screeched Hepzibah in a pop-eyed rage. "Get out, you ungrateful villains! Get out and never come back!" Forage and Heathfern packed their belongings and left the house. "I hate you," hissed Forage. "I'll get you," spat Heathfern. And the two boys took their separate roads into the world to make their fortunes. Forage left the land of monsters by way of Carrion Creek. That evening, he reached the little town of East Bloon, where he found the happy villagers giggling, tickling each other, and dancing around the square. He stared at the group and then elbowed his way into the center. "Pay attention to me," he roared. "I am a great and powerful magician. Unless you make me your king, I will topple the tower of your town hall at dawn tomorrow." The villagers laughed and laughed. "Throw this oaf out of the village," they said. "What a pompous nitwit! What a giddy buffoon!" The village band struck up a lively tune, and everyone went back to the dance. Growling and grumbling, Forage stalked away, but that night he sneaked back to the village, climbed the tower, and used a powerful magnet he had stolen from his mother to pull out all the nails. When dawn came, he rang the village fire bell. "Make me king! Make me king!" he bellowed as the sleepy villagers stumbled into the town square. "Make me king, or I'll turn all of you into chicken powder." He scrambled to the top of the town hall and gave the tower a terrible shove. To everyone's horror, the weakened structure creaked, swayed, and then tumbled to the ground. "Ha ha, ho ho, hee hee," cackled Forage as the frightened village elders called a council meeting and then scurried about to gather flowers and leaves for a crown for their new king. "Ha ha, ho ho." Forage grabbed the crown from the villagers and jammed it on his head. He then demanded a chest of jewels, a magnificent new castle, a stable of horses, and a wardrobe of silk, velvet, and mink. East Bloon was in a state of panic. The townspeople hurried to their homes and collected their family treasures, their fattest animals, their precious jewels, their ancestral robes, and gave them all to Forage. But still, Forage was not happy. Weeks passed. The strongest men of East Bloon worked night and day to build a magnificent castle. The women and children worked in the fields to gather hay for the royal stable of horses. But still, Forage was not happy. He insulted the ladies, He punched the village elders. He threw things at the members of his court, and still he was not happy. The only pastime that gave Horridge any pleasure was eating, and he began to gorge himself from breakfast to bedtime. Soon he was so monstrously fat that he could not walk, and his servants had to carry him from his bed to the banquet table and back again. One day, while Horridge was munching on a turkey and staring out of his royal window, he spied a village on a nearby hill with a castle rising above its rooftops. "Who's that threatening neighbor?" he demanded. A servant replied, "It is the friendly village of West Bloon, your majesty." Horridge picked up a telescope and focused it on the castle. To his amazement, he spotted a fat, crowned figure peering through a telescope back at him. It was Heathfern. "Eeyog!" shrieked Horridge. He rang the bells that summoned all the villagers to the castle. "Prepare for war!" he cried. "Wall the city! Build a giant catapult to hurl rocks at West Bloon. I will go to the land of monsters and bring back the largest beast I can find. He'll terrify their armies. He'll trample their houses into splinters. He'll knock down my brother's castle. Then we'll capture the scoundrel and throw him into a special brother smashing machine that will mash him into mush." The last whisper of joy went out of life in East Bloon. The dismal villagers began rolling boulders up the hill for the wall that was to surround their town. The elders began making maps of the enemy territory. The blacksmiths began forging the brother smasher. Horridge himself was hoisted into his carriage. He whipped his horses to a wild gallop and drove them across the fields of Bloon until he came to a cave in the land of monsters. The cave was dark and still. Horridge lit a torch and drove his carriage deep into the world of winding passages and gurgling hot springs. At last he found a familiar room filled with strange, lumbering creatures. "This one will do," he muttered, and he lassoed the larger of two monsters that lay cradled in each other's arms. "This one will do very well indeed." Horridge imprisoned the beast in the castle dungeon. For days the gentle creature lay in chains, grieving for his mate in the mountain, while the court blacksmith scurried about measuring him for a suit of armor. Look how sad he is. He's crying. The day finally arrived. Bells rang throughout the town. The army, the wall, the catapult, the armored beast, and the brother smasher were all ready. Horridge called a meeting of all the villagers. "Today, lucky citizens," he announced, "is the day that you've been waiting for. We'll surprise our enemies in West Bloon by bashing them before they bash us. When we have won, you will be heroes, and I will be king of East and West Bloon." He urged them all to join him in several choruses of the East Bloon victory chant. "Horridge, Horridge, sis boom ba, we will mush them, ya, ya, ya." The village band broke into a noisy marching tune, and Horridge ordered the chattering procession to grab their weapons and file through the iron gates. Across the valley, the gates of West Bloon also swung open. Ranks of soldiers appeared on the hillside, and towering above them was an enormous armored machine. On top of the machine sat King Heathfern. "Eeyog!" screamed Horridge. "Forward march!" The villagers lifted their spears, the catapults were rolled into place, and the army of East Bloon went forward, clanking and rattling and billowing clouds of dust to meet the army of West Bloon. "Smash them, smush them, bash them, crush them!" bellowed the kings. A long drum roll echoed across the valley. Horridge raised his arm. "Charge!" he roared, and his soldiers began to race across the field. The beast of East Bloon lumbered forward. And suddenly, he stopped short. He peered through his metal eye holes and rose up on his hind legs. The enormous metal heap on which King Heathfern sat was his mate from the land of monsters. Crying out with joy, the two happy animals toppled their riders, tore off their metal plates, and fell gurgling into each other's arms. Horridge lay on his back in the dust like a helpless tortoise. "Charge! Charge!" he screeched, "or I'll turn you into chicken powder!" The bewildered villagers stared at the loving beasts. They looked at Horridge and Heathfern rolling around on the ground. They did not know what to do. So, hurriedly, the elders of East and West Bloon called a joint council meeting. They whispered, they muttered, they scratched their heads. Finally, a loud cheer went up. "By order of the council," the elders announced, "Kings Horridge and Heathfern are dethroned from this day and forever forward. They are invited by the good grace of the villagers of East and West Bloon to live happily and peacefully as citizens of the United Kingdom of Bloon." The soldiers pulled off their armor and threw it into the Brother Smasher, which promptly mashed it into mush. The East Bloon band broke into a joyous tune, and the armies flung themselves into a rousing polka. "Join us! Join us!" they shouted to the kings. "Never!" shouted Horridge. "I'd rather die!" growled Heathfern. Uh-oh. And the people called for the strongest men of the United Kingdom of Bloon to roll the brothers onto the catapult and send them flying. I wonder where they land. Right on Hepzibah's new place. And she says, "Eeyog!" And that is the Wicked Kings of East and West Bloon.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of Reading with Sheep.
Read 'em in sheep.